everybody, to James Diboe Discovering. Dedicated to original peoples as always. We got a special guest on, Professor Kaba, straight from the United States. Welcome back, my brother.
My brother, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the invite back again. I look forward to this conversation.
Excellent. But just made up to have you back on again. Now, you took a trip to Egypt, and you said your last trip was 1987, if I'm right?
Yes, 1987.
Okay, so what was the changes that you noticed? And you went last year, was it?
Yes, it was June. It was June of 24. It was for the summer solstice.
Okay. So how was that experience anyway?
The experience itself was phenomenal. And the reason why I say that is because there were, for instance, when I was there in 83 and 87, we didn't get to go into the pyramid of Unas, which is in the pyramid complex outside of Cairo, Giza. And we were able to go in this time. And in my book, Spirituality Before Religions, there was a lot of work that I had done on the pyramid text itself.
Okay.
And one of the things that I guess this is me personally, is I always like to experience something while I'm
Yeah.
doing my research. For instance, in 2009, I was invited to come to UK, and I went to the British Museum and I did a tour. And I did a class outside of the Shabaka stone. And you see, the Shabaka stone had been so important to me. That's what my third book is on. And so because I went there, I felt like there was a completion in my work, because that's where the Shabaka stone is. It's in the British Museum. The same is true with the story I'm telling you now about going into the pyramid complex of Unas. He's the last Nesetbiti, or pharaoh. Africans called Nesetbiti, but the word we use is pharaoh. Well, I use Nesetbiti, but the word commonly used is pharaoh. Unas, he was the last Nesetbiti pharaoh of the fifth dynasty. He has the most complete collection of the pyramid texts. And because I had spent so much time on the pyramid text in my book, Spirituality Before Religions, I felt the same type of completion, my brother. And so that's what I really appreciate about this trip. Of the many things that I did, along with being in the temple of Edfu, the temple of Heru at Edfu, for the summer solstice, to watch the sun rise and cast its shine into the temple. It was quite an experience for me. And so there were things that have changed as it relates to update. Like, for instance, everybody's skating now. All the young people are in the street skating. That I didn't see. I saw young people taking pictures on the phones. See, when I was there in 87, this technology wasn't here.
Yeah.
So that, they've the populace, the people have moved very quickly to that, and the young ladies in the fast food restaurants, hanging out, talking to each other. That I didn't see in 87. So there are fundamental changes, even with young. We went to a place, brother. We went to a restaurant, and outside there was a lot of young people. And when they saw us coming, because there were 61 of us, and our brother Axel was the one that had coordinated it, and he asked me if I would co-host it, and I taught classes. That was my responsibility, was to teach classes. And when the great majority of the people on the tour were from here in the United States, but there was a large contingent of people from the UK there. And there were people from the Netherlands. There were people from various parts of the world. and all of us were of African descent. So when the young people outside the restaurant saw us coming, they put their radio on and started dancing to hip hop.
Big changes.
Okay. This is the changes I'm talking about. But I saw a lot of change in the young people. Okay. It is a different generation coming up now. And because of social media, like I'm telling you, with the phone, with the radio, and they were blasting the hip hop music and they were playing hip hop, well, rap music. They were playing rap music and they were dancing. They were doing also, and I found it it's on tape. There was phenomenal brother was with us named Ses Fifth. He does phenomenal work. Anybody want to hear some conscious rap? Ses Fifth, SES with the Roman numeral 5, which is a V. Ses Fifth. He he was taping it. So he's got all that on tape. And then he did recording of his work when we were in Luxor. And the young people came out and crowded all around him. And he made them part of the chorus. So there's changes occurring, you know? And I see it in the young people, as I always do, brother, because that's my life's mission, working with children. And so I'm always watching children to see where they are progressing in the world arena. And they really received us well. The children received us well. Some of them followed us everywhere we went because we were in two different places, hotels where we stayed.
Interesting. So would you say it's more, for example, with it being religious country, did you find it was more strict when you went in 1987 to to now?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And the differences that I see is because, see, the tourist basically most of the time, not all of the time, but as you know, because you've traveled, most of the time when let's just say non-melanated people travel,
Yeah.
there were certain things that they did. They brought them to the temples and for instance, Spanish was my second language growing up. I grew up in a community where there were many people from Puerto Rico, República Dominicana, the Dominican Republic. And so Spanish was my second language. English is my base language, that's my foundation, but Spanish was my second language. And so growing up, I became fluent, somewhat fluent. But then since I've done other things, I'm not as fluent in Spanish, but I do understand it in many different ways. And there was a group that was from, I think they might have been from South America, from the accent that I heard in their Spanish. It wasn't Caribbean Spanish, it wasn't Spain Spanish. And it wasn't Mexican Spanish. It sounded like it was some type Argentinian or Venezuelan or something like that. And the tour guide spoke Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I heard him telling them about the temple was so ridiculous. And so I have a sense of what they're telling the tourists. But to go back to the point I'm making is that when Dr. Ben and others began bringing large numbers of Black folk, African folk, to Kemet, to Egypt, the whole tenor changed because we were going there and honestly, we know more than the guides do.
Well, I found that because when I went to Kemet, I booked like a package because I was in the airport and I got delayed and that. So I ended up doing a package at the airport, which I wouldn't do next time because I felt it would probably cost a lot of money. He added a guide in there. So I don't actually need a guide, but I thought if it's someone like yourself, like I didn't know I would be with. So what happened was I was assuming that the guide was going to come inside the temples, but they basically just got in the car with you and he didn't actually come into the temple. They had to stay outside, and I just didn't see the point in having the guide. But there's different type of guides where you can actually bring them into the temples.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
maybe it was a bit different. What it was is I landed in Cairo, and I'm planning to go to Luxor within the next couple of hours. So what happened was our bags didn't come through our cases because when we changed over to Germany, Lufthansa or something like that, the bags didn't come over. So now I'm stuck in Cairo waiting for me bags, and then we're getting in touch with Lufthansa, and our bags haven't come through. So we ended up having to go straight to Luxor and waiting for our bags to get delivered. Oh, it was a nightmare. So we've got so much time at the airport. So we end up doing the package and kind of regret doing the package because I feel like it cost me a bit more. But it covered like Luxor, it covered Cairo, it covered Aswan, the train to Aswan. So in some ways it was okay. But you threw a guide in there, but the guide just takes you there as a little talk outside, you know, the area where you go in and you pay to go in. But the guy was just starts. They were allowed to stay by the canteen. The canteen, they were only like allowed there. They weren't coming into temples. But like I said, I would prefer, say, if I was going with yourself or Chika Aku or someone like that. But what would you say the difference between these guides and yourself or Dr. Ben? What would you say the differences are?
Well, for one thing, they couldn't read the walls.
Yeah. Doesn't know.
You know, they go 6, 7 weeks training,
Yeah.
told what to say. But here we are with people such as Dr. Rickety Wimby, Amen, Dr. Jacob Carruthers. They have studied the Medunetta. Okay. In terms of my book, Spirituality Before Religions, I'm interpreting, you see, there's transcription and there's translation.
Yeah.
In transcription, what you do is you measure, like for instance, the Rosetta Stone, you measure the symbol, because that's how they said they were able to decipher the Medunetaire, Champollion and others back in the day. With the Rosetta Stone, it was written in 3 parts. It's there in the British Museum also. When you walk in, if the British Museum is still the same, when we walked in where in the aisle that we walked down, the corridor that we walked down, the Rosetta Stone is right there at the end looking at you. Then you make a right over to where the Shabaka Stone was. But the thing is that they said that it was 3 different languages. And you know, the top was hieroglyphic, Medunetaire. The next was hieratic, and then the one under that was what they call classical Greek. But now that's not classical Greek. That's another African script that the Greeks adopted.
Coptic, is it? Or...
Well, Coptic, they say, is the actual verbalization of what Medunetta is. It is the remnant of uh, hieroglyphics or Medunetaire, the Coptic.
Okay.
And so it's very interesting how they've developed that concept. But you see, what they did is that the ancient, well, Champollion and others knew how to read classical Greek, what they call classical. So what they did is they took letter for letter for the 3 when they found out that it was the same thing written 3 times, but in 3 different scripts. That's how they were able to transcribe it. But you see, they don't know how to translate it.
Right.
And there's a difference. As Black folk, our experience, our DNA is embedded in us.
That's right. Yeah.
Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, the brilliant Senegalese scholar, was able to take his language of Senegal, Wolof, and compare it to hieroglyphs or Medunetaire.
Millions.
Okay?
Millions.
when he did that, he connected the Medunete of East Africa with the language of West Africa. So there is a, as Dr. Diop in one of his books says, there's a cultural unity in Black Africa.
Very interesting.
And that cultural unity of Black Africa brought the information when we were stolen from Africa, enslaved, and brought to this diaspora. We brought that DNA in us with us.
Yeah.
And so what Dr. Richetti is doing as a master transcriber and translator of Medunete, what Dr. Jacob Carruthers and what others who have studied the language have done is they've gone within and they have been able to tap into that DNA of understanding how to translate it. We have a brother here from Chicago, brilliant brother, Dr. Walter Williams.
He passed away.
He just joined the Ancestors not long ago.
Yeah.
And he and I worked together when I would go to Chicago. He was my elder. He was brilliant. He was very funny. He had a phenomenal personality.
Yeah.
And he and I used to always talk about, because he said that Medunete has not been translated yet.
I was actually going to ask you that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to tell him, I used to say, with respect, I said, I think you are both right, but I think you're inaccurate. You see, it's not about being wrong. It's about being inaccurate because our children are going to bring this to the next level.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very important. For instance, with me, I know that Dr. Ben told me he was only scratching the surface. If he was only scratching the surface, I know that I am only scratching the scratch of his work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of more work we have to do, brother. Yes, that's a brilliant scholar. Okay, a student of that's right. And then of course, you know the work of Clyde Winters.
Yeah, he does that connection also.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we are making these connections. And as African, you see, people of the Western world, when you look at the work of Dr. Edwin Nichols, who is a clinical psychiatrist,
yeah,
he's an organizational psychiatrist. I just bought his book the other day. I didn't even know he had a book. But I worked with him in Florida when we were developing a school for children in Tampa and in Atlanta. And what he talks about, Dr. Nichols talks about, is the axiology or the worldview of three major groups. And he puts other cultures within each of these groups. The African, the Asian, and the European.
Yeah.
And the axiology of the African is their worldview, the way they build the world is first from within, but then it's person to person.
Okay.
The relationship that a person has with another person, has with another person, has with another person, creates the society.
Okay.
That's our axiology. That's the way we see the world, person to person. And you can see it in us even today.
Right. Yeah.
In the Asian world, because of their experience in the ice, they depended on the group for their survival. Yes.
Yeah.
So their relationship, their worldview is person to group.
Yeah.
The European is person to material wealth.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you look at that and then you superimpose Medunete or the African lifestyle, the Asian community looks at the African world as a group, and they misinterpret our person-to-person relationship.
Yeah, the different diversities in Africa, you don't really, they just see whether you're from Congo, Nigeria, Ghana.
That's it.
Everyone.
Group.
Yeah, yeah.
The European is looking at the material wealth.
Yeah.
So that what is happening now with Dr. Theophilus Obenga, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, Dr. Raketi Wimbi, okay, Dr. Jacob Carruthers, and all the others that are doing phenomenal work in Medu Neter. There's a lot of work being done. I'm just not calling their names right now, but they're doing phenomenal work. But they are bringing the African person-to-person relationship to the translation of Medu Neter. And so that's why I said with Dr. Walter Williams, I used to say, you are right. There's a lot more work we have to do. A picture speaks 1,000 words, but a symbol speaks 1,000 pictures. We are a figurative language people. We are the type of people that look at things through visual symbols. And those symbols, it could mean something different to you as it does to me. But we're both right. Okay. We could bring 4 other people in here and look at something. Like if I showed you a picture of a yellow circle. Okay, basically somebody say, oh, that's the sun.
Yeah.
If you were from the Caribbean, you would say, oh, I feel heat.
Yeah.
You're right. You're both right. Someone else would say, oh, that reminds me of Heru, the falcon.
Different expressions, like for example, sometimes I don't want to put it in terms of, where we have lots of different deities. Like if we were dealing with a supreme being, and this is with a lot of indigenous black groups I've noticed, and you might see it's an outsider that comes in. And they're looking at who are all these deities, the Africans believe in multiple gods, 1,000 gods. We're not realizing that we recognize a supreme being, no likeness of it. No one's actually seen the supreme being. So there's different aspects like Shango, Ogun, Oshun. But like what I've found, like speaking to a lot of indigenous peoples, like the Yoruba, for example, Oludumare. That's their highest god, even though they have these other gods like Shango, god of thunder, god of wind, and these different ones. But from an outsider, they'll just see it as Africans believe they're thousands of gods, rather than recognizing, the whole totality, the whole, everything is connected in one force, but at the same time, one force is always the duality, like the laws of opposites, the laws of nature. But for an outsider, it's like, now this brings me to religion, Abraham's religions now. It's like Akhenaten when he was speaking on one God. When I say one God, he banished a lot of the deities, didn't he? Akhenaten. And then later when Christianity comes, the Torah, sorry, they're dealing with a one God, for example, and Christianity and Islam. So for them to start making these religions, obviously they've seen what's going on in Africa in order for them to make any type of religions. So where would you say the Hebrews, start with the Hebrew, for example, them making the connection with Africa? Where do you find how the connection started?
Well,
to go to the one God.
Well, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop talks about it. This is, of course, when you read, there's a book by Ahmed Asman, Ahmedosman, and it's titled Moses and Akhenaten. And so what the Indo-European people did when they came upon the African spiritual systems is they superimposed historical figures of Africa and created a mythological story that became a religion. And what's interesting, I grew up Roman Catholic, very much into the church. And I always looked at the Bible as that book. And it was the New Testament. And then before that, it was the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And it was perceived that the Old Testament actually was what we call Judaism.
Yes. Okay.
And that the New Testament was from Christ on.
Okay. So like the Orthodox of Ethiopia, Orthodox Christians, they practice the Old Testament in the practices.
Well, actually, brother, there's a book called Lafafa Sadek.
Yeah.
That is the Ethiopian Book of Life, or the Book of the Coming Forth Today by Night, that was adapted by the Africans that they brought up into Kemet.
Yeah.
But in actuality, Christianity, if you look at it as a religion, existed before Judaism.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to see where you go with this now, because it wasn't making sense that as if Judaism came before, but then everything kind of links to Christianity. But when I say Christianity, maybe we didn't call it Christianity. I don't know what we called it.
The Amen priesthood. The Amen priesthood is the model. This is why you have the Neset Biti, or the Pharaoh. That's the Pope.
Yeah.
And then you have the high priest and priestesses, although the Catholic Church doesn't have respect for women. So it's only men cardinals.
Yeah.
And then you have bishops, monsignors, priests. You see, so the taxonomy, or the categorization of the society of Christianity, was based on the Amen priesthood.
Yeah. Did it start? Dr. Ben mentioned about it starting in Egypt.
Well,
you mentioned Alexandria.
Well, it started. Are you talking about Christianity?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it could very well have started there. What we do know is that it started long after the 00 mark of the Piscean Age. Okay, because from a perspective that we're looking at, Christ really is Heru.
Yes, yes.
So that, historically speaking, Christ never existed.
Yeah.
Historically speaking. There are records of all of the emperors of Rome.
On Hidden Colors, when I was watching these on Hidden Colors, I remember people speaking about a couple of years, he was speaking on this Christ was supposed to be born in a cave in Ethiopia, and then after the conference in Nicaea, somehow ends up in Bethlehem.
Also, what was going on is that was a political move on Constantine's part.
Okay.
He was trying to take control of the Western Church and the Eastern Church.
Yeah.
And so he called forward the Nicene Conference, where they wanted to consolidate both East and West Catholic, Roman Church. And so that's how that conceptual framework. But you see, the idea is, even when you look at the story of Christianity, first of all, we know that the letter J didn't exist in the language until 1526.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so his name could not have been Jesus, and his name couldn't have been Judas, and they couldn't have been called Jews. Yes. Well, and also symbolically, I remember growing up as a Roman Catholic. The difference between a Christian system and a Roman Catholic is that in Roman Catholic, you have Jesus on the cross, on the cruci. In fact, it's not called a cross, it's called a crucifixion. It's called a crucifix.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the difference. If you're Methodist, Episcopal, Baptist, you have a cross, but there's nothing on it. In Roman Catholicism, you have the Jesus the Christ on the cross. That's how you know the difference. And above the cross, there was like this little plaque that was put on top above Christ's head that said INRI. And that was supposed to mean Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. So both of the I's represented the sound J.
Yeah.
And you see, my brother, I was always in trouble because I always had questions.
I'll tell you, got a thousand of them or more.
I used to raise my hand all the time, and the nun would say, "Oh God, Booker got another question."
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to figure this out.
Let's get to this path that you don't.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And the search, because I've always been a very spiritual person, but I haven't been very religious.
Yeah.
Because I have a problem with authority.
Definitely.
And see, as a black person, you have to have a problem with authority because the authority has told you untruths.
Yeah.
And so from very young, I always had and I was trying to figure out, well, sister, let me ask you this. If you said it's Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, why is the letter I up there? Why isn't the letter J up there? And so they could never answer that question. So his name couldn't have been Jesus. But the point I'm making, brother, to think about the story itself, because again, as a writer, you think of the author. Because when I read books, man, I really get deep inside of books. My mother used to always say, you get too deep. But I need answers for everything. Just don't tell me something. I need to understand. And I really got in trouble one time because I said, well, Jesus is really not the hero of the story. Judas is. Because if Judas hadn't betrayed Jesus, Jesus wouldn't have been crucified. He probably would have lived a long life, got married, had children, and nobody would ever know he existed.
Yeah.
But when Judas betrayed him, that's what made everybody go against him. And that's when he was crucified. And that's where Christianity came from. And I would say, sister, you know, like, can you answer that question? Why is Judas looked upon as an evil person? Because he was the one that created Christianity. Oh man, I got in trouble for that, brother. I'm trying to figure this out. As a child, see, this is why I think my success with children comes from the fact that I still think like a child. I still, when I was a kindergarten teacher, first grade teacher, second grade teacher, I always got along very well with the children because I never acted like an authority. I acted like someone that cared for them and wanted them to learn something that would make them better people. But it wasn't authoritative. My attitude wasn't authoritative, no more than it is even right now to this day when I talk to folk. I'm not authoritative. I'm just someone that enjoys the person to person relationship. And the human spirit picks that up, you see, as opposed to preaching and pontificating and telling people. I tell people all the time, I don't want you to believe me. I'm not here to make you believe me. I simply want to make you think. Okay, don't get angry with me because I say that Jesus never existed. Just think about what I said. Think. Don't get upset. Just think about what I said. I'm not a bad person. I'm not trying to do bad things.
Yeah.
But I just want you to think about who you have dedicated your life to, and he never existed.
When you make people think, you're actually really breaking their limitations. You're giving them options.
Yeah.
You got options when you're able to think. You
Yeah.
can't be stuck in the one box and you can't see nothing outside of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And see, what I tell people about the box, because I hear people say, you're thinking outside the box. I say, no, I'm on another level because I want you to understand that there is no box.
Yeah, that created box.
Because if I get out the box and you're in the box, you can't see me because I'm out and you're in. If you realize there is no box at all, we can see each other. And see, that's what becomes important to me. There is no box. That's an illusion that they've created that creates boundaries amongst people.
White supremacy, it shouldn't exist. It's an invention, but it's an actual real thing. It's being created to become a real issue.
Yes.
When in reality, all the great things what Europeans were writing about Africans in ancient times, Herodotus, Theodorus, some of these Greek writers, and the way in the last couple of 100 years how Europeans have spoke about Africans being very negative, like we didn't have a history, all we did is have slavery. So it makes you think that, like, if you trace history back, you can see the origins of where white supremacy begins.
Absolutely. And you see, to me, Africans never had slavery. They had servitude.
Yeah.
And they did some mistreated their servants. That's true. Some of them even killed their servants. That's true. But slavery is an institution. The institution that Europeans created in Africa, if you were a servant, you still were considered a human being.
Yeah.
If you were a servant to another African, they didn't consider you counting cows and horses and possessions. If you had children while you were in servitude, your children were born free. You were free in Africa. You were just a servant. It's like servants today. You're a butler, you're a maid, you're free, but you got to work for somebody. So that the idea of Africans having slavery was only to pacify the conscience of Europeans who had enslaved, even Arab servitude. Yeah. Arabs didn't have slaves. You could work your way out of that condition you were in.
Interesting. Yeah.
You see, Europeans made a law. It was a law that if you were black, you were inferior, that you were a servitude, that you were in servitude for perpetuity, for life. You were born a slave, you was going to die a slave. If an African woman was raped by the European slaveholder, enslaver, that child was born a slave. That's not the way it was in Africa. We can't compare the two. It's two different things altogether. It's not to say that it was a good thing, because I mean some Africans mistreated other human beings, but that was not when they mistreated you, they still looked at you like you were a human being. They were mistreating a human being.
Yeah.
And you could work your way out of your condition. So that there's a difference between those concepts. Not to mention that slavery, according to Joel Augustus Rogers in his book, he tells you that slavery came from Europe because the first slaves of Europe were the people like Yugoslavians, Czechoslovakians,
Yeah.
and Slav, interesting, means people of glory. Because you see now in Ukraine and Russia, this situation, they have a proverb. What did it say? Slave Ukraini. which means honor the Ukraine, people of glory. Slave is a good word.
Interesting that the root word of it.
Yeah, Slav. And that comes from meaning people of honor, people of glory. That's why they say Slavi Ukraini. Honor the Ukrainian. It's a proverb. You'll hear them say it.
Yeah.
And for people, at home checking this out, Google it. Google the meaning of the word slave, Slave, as it relates to Europe.
I mean, that was from what we always get taught is that the people who were the Slavs were enslaved by other Europeans.
Yes. Well, that's the history too.
Yeah, yeah. But the word Slav doesn't actually mean what we know as slavery.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Okay. Interesting.
But the way in which the Slavic people were treated by other Europeans
Yeah.
could be compared to the way Britain treated Ireland.
Yeah. They were practicing it. They had enough experience practicing this type of evilness on their own people. So when the time they came to Africa, even though they took it to a whole other level, but they sure had a lot of experience doing evil and brutality to
Yes.
their own people.
Yes.
So it was nothing to do with to another people.
Yes. And I tell people all the time, if you want to get to the depth of it, just Google the word feudal, feudalism. Feudalism. Google it. And in feudalism, you'll see that the person in charge was called what? Called a lord. And the person that was enslaved was called a serf.
Yeah.
And then look at the way in which they built their society. If I got power and I got my dogs behind me, if I got my gang and I come onto your territory, I can take your wife, your child, everything that you own. I can take it all, and there's no law. I am the law. And I'm telling you, your stuff is mine now. That's feudalism.
Yeah.
Africans didn't do that. Say again, brother.
Is the way we are taught as well about the Arab enslavement. Now, I'm aware of like people rising up, in certain situations, but the way we're told that could even be worse in some ways through like the castrations. Some people believe it was millions of Africans, particularly Bantu peoples and stuff. So I hear different things you see of the Arab enslavement. There's nothing really clear about it. But just from what you're aware of and what you've studied, how do you find the Arab enslavement? And also, this is Professor James Smalls. He mentioned about when the Arab slave trade started, it was taken over by the Turks. The Turks become the dominant masters in when they were in, it was around Kemet.
You see, all of them are the same people.
Turks, Arabs.
All of them are the same. Arabs don't exist.
Yeah.
According to Dr. Diop, I break it up into two simple groups: the northern people and the southern people.
Yeah.
Northern people they all were African, but the northern people, the northern Africans, would be put upon by what's called the worm glaciation or the worm ice age.
North Africa,
No, I'm talking about Europe.
Oh, yeah, Europe, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And Dr. Diop talks about the zone of confluence, which means where the line breaks from the north to the south, where the ice age occurred above the 51st parallel north of our planet. That would cut Ireland in half. It would cut England in half. It would come around through Europe, around Asia, and it would even come to the United States, Canada in particular, but then it would be pushed down as each ice age, because it was more than just one. But the one that we're concerned with is the fourth one, because of the fact that the fourth one was when humans were in the area, give or take 50, 60,000 years ago. There were humans in that area. They had gone during what's called an interglacial period, which was a warming trend. And then what they didn't know is that that interstadial or warming trend, what would come forward would be an ice age. And they were caught in the ice age. And if you look at that area, you see there's mountain ranges that go straight across. The Caucasus Mountains in particular, that would become prisons for these Africans. They couldn't travel back south. They were caught in the ice. So they had to put more clothes on and retreat into caves. And in so doing, they depigmented themselves, their hair texture changed, their body morphology, size changed. A lot of things changed for those Africans in order to be able to survive in the cold. And then when the ice age melted and the next interstadial came was about, give or take, I would say maybe, well, when the ice mountain started to melt was about 2000 BC. And this is where you see a lot of people come talking about these people that are coming from the north out of the mountains, these barbarians. I did a 4-part series on the origin and development of the Caucasoid to help us understand why you see what's happening. And these are African people, man. And I know that we all don't want to embrace it. We all want to make them separate individuals, but they are African people who have gone through a traumatic experience, the Ice Age.
But so many other people affected the Ice Age, like the Greeks, Italians, the Spanish, Portuguese.
Well, they, yeah, yes and no. They were not Europeans.
Okay. What we know is yeah.
Yeah, because Europa is an African woman. So it's even, when we talk about these things, we don't even realize that Europa was an African deity.
So we're placing people into groups of people.
Yes.
For example, you look at like the Minoan civilization and the depictions of increase, they're like kind of a brown color. I wouldn't say they're as dark as some of the Africans, but at the same time, they're not as white as the Caucasus as we know them. So, what would you say happened in places like the southern Mediterranean? Would it be like a mixture of Africans and then obviously a mixture of European? Well, as we know, the northern people.
I think
people.
Yeah, brother, I think that when we start getting into this science without the emotion of what the Western world has done to the great majority of the human family, and we look at it for what it is, we'll come to realize what makes you look the way you look is the sun. You can go to Ethiopia and you can see people of many different shades. You see, once you get out of the equator area, the sun is going to impact you differently. So that your complexion will differ. You may not be as melanated because you need the melanin and the carbon in your body to protect you from the heat of the sun. As you move away from the sun in the equator, your body is not exposed to such intense heat. So the melanin is going to become less. So you'll be a different shade. And so it's and like even when you get into Southern Africa and you look at the Khoisan people, you'll notice that they are a lighter complexion people. But they are not mixed with African or Asian. Even when you look at their eyes, they're the Khoi people in particular. You look at their eyes, you say, wow, they look Chinese. But there's no such thing as Chinese eyes.
That's right. Yeah.
Your eyes are formed by your environment. The Khoi people, the Khoi, are the ones near the Kalahari Desert. The San people are the ones that's more into the forest area. Same people, but the impact of their environment is different. So that when you're near the desert and there's strong winds blowing in your face, you'll squint your eyes. And when you squint your eyes become smaller. There's a fold that comes in your eye to protect your eyes from the sand coming in. When you get up into the Sahel, which is the boundary of the Sahara Desert, there are folk, West African folk, that when you look at them, you say, wow, they look Chinese, but they're not Chinese. See, we've got so much in our head that when you have slanted eyes, you're Asian. The reason why Asians have slanted eyes is because when they were in the mountains of Europe, when they went over into Asia at some point in time, there were strong winds in the mountains and it blew in your face. And if you were at the particular part of the mountain where the wind blew down, your eyes slant down. If you were in where it blew directly in your face, your eyes slant back. If you're in the area like in the upper mountain where the wind blew up, your eyes will slant up. That's why you see so many different versions of Asian people.
So if you're going back anyway, the more further back you seem to go in places like China, for example, you see a lot of dark-skinned Chinese, pretty much like black people, and Japan. So if you look and think, well, how did this modern day phenotype of what the Chinese look like today become the majority in China, where at one time we had a lot of dark-skinned people, as Renaud Rashidi was speaking about, the Shang Dynasty.
Yes.
You know, these all, and also the Black Samurai and the Ainu people and stuff. So, how would you think, like, was it more down to war, like, basically Mongoloid type people do it in the ice, like you said, and they're coming out the ice?
Yes.
And being a warlike people, being able to conquer the dark-skinned so-called Chinese people.
Yes. Absolutely. That's exactly how it happened. At some point in time, when the Ice Age ended, the known as the Cro-Magnon.
Yeah.
Okay, Grimaldi were the Africans. Cro-Magnon were the Africans that had been impacted by the Ice Age. Lighter complexion, straighter hair. And see, in my book, Carbon Before Melanin, what I'm trying to focus on, I have a whole section on hair. What makes hair what it is? What makes it kinky? What makes it frizzy? What makes it wavy? What makes it straight? What makes it dead straight? And it has to do with the oil in your scalp, in your hair follicle. It has nothing to do with good hair or bad hair.
Yeah.
These are all ridiculous conversations that we're having. And so, when you look at the Asian people of today, the Chinese in particular, coming down, they are the ones that were coming together. They were the ones that depended on the group. When you look at the Tang dynasty, the Shang dynasty, the early dynasties of this area known as Asia, they were person to person. That's how they built their society. That's how they built the Great Wall of China. Person to person.
The dark-skinned Chinese, for example, they must have mixed together the darker skin and to the Mongolian type of looking, Eskimo type looking, to produce what we have today. And it looks like that, how would I put it? Because of the Han Chinese, they make up almost about 90% of China. And you've got these small ethnic groups. Now, an interesting thing Dr. Renaud Rashidi mentioned, he was speaking about during the Qin dynasty. I'm not sure if that's the late 1800s, early 1900s. And you can actually find videos on YouTube, and you see a lot of dark-skinned Chinese people. And this is only a little over 100 years. So he's saying that during the Qin dynasty, right to Chairman Mao, they seem to, I don't know how to be exterminated, but you don't see them after that, really. Now, I'm aware of the Europeans, many Europeans going into China. So I don't know if there was anything to do with the Europeans lighting them up, when they're colonizing and mixing with peoples. But then there would have been a hell of a lot of people because of the big population. So he reckons that did Chairman Mao exterminate them, or was it something from during the Qin dynasty when maybe Europeans were going over there? And I know they can conquer and divide very well. So it's just, he doesn't have an exact answer for it, but we're still researching on it.
Yes. Yeah, and it could be a mixture of both.
It could be a mixture of both.
And again, future research will answer these questions. And yeah, this is what I really focus on more than anything else. I just want to make people think.
That's right. Yeah.
Because what you've been told is not true. When someone tells a perfect lie, the truth is unbelievable. So my thing is not to make you think I'm right. I just want you to understand what you've been told is wrong. That's all. I just want to make you think. There's a lot that I may be teaching now that our future generations will perfect. Just like the great work of Dr. Ivan van Sertima, his student, Dr. David Imhotep, the author of The First Americans Were Africans. Okay. Well, yeah. And he and I were friends. And he used to talk to me about certain things, how much he admired Dr. Van Sertima. But he certainly took Dr. Van Sertima's work to a whole nother level. Okay. And there will be people that will take Dr. Imhotep's work to the next level. That's what it must be about. And this is what we must encourage the future generations to do this. It's their obligation to become more accurate than me. And yes, listen to what I'm saying, because what I'm saying is accurate for what I have. Every generation has done the best they can with what they have. Okay? Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop did the very best he could with what he had at his disposal. Okay? And so when we, as the younger scholars, come forward, we must respect them for what they did. J.A. Rogers did the best he could with what he could do in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. Okay? There are things that he has said that now people are coming forward and finding that we can say it another way. We can take it to another level. It doesn't make him wrong. It's just that it makes the future generations more accurate. So I mean, not put down nobody before me, because I am who I am because of them. So we'll learn and we'll study and we'll get better at this information. We'll get more accurate.
I think what would also help as well is it's one thing for us to research, but it's another thing of some of those countries, like I mentioned, like China, India, the younger generations help them being able to tell the truth. Example, Brother Renaud Rashidi and Ivan van Sertima, Africans of Asia, Ivan van Sertima book. Renaud has the feature on Asia. He mentions in it that when he was going to India, that he knew that the Hindus who were ruling India are suppressing data. So they didn't mind speaking of black folks who were enslaved, brought into India. But anything to do with Africans connected to a civilization, they don't seem to have any data. But the Hindus basically are running India, and they're very racist with the caste system. So hopefully their future generations, same the Chinese, the Japanese, just tell the truth.
Yes.
Stop suppressing things, because like the older generation have got that, like, they got that thing with black folks, like, really look down at us. And I'm not saying all Asians, by the way. I'm just saying how this society views us, which rubs off on the individuals.
And that
Hopefully that changes.
well, it will change, or
Yeah,
or they'll perish. It's the bottom line. The bottom line is that truth crushed to earth will surely rise.
definitely.
And that's it. And today is Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, January 15th. And I often quote Dr. King when he said, truth crushed to earth will rise. And he also said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. The truth will come out. You can't, one way or another, brother, you cannot cancel the truth. You can postpone it, which is what they're doing, but you can't cancel it. And it's up to the younger generations to say, we've had enough of this nonsense. It's done. The way you're living is dumb.
Yeah, and we've also got to communicate with these people. Like when I see a lot of Chinese people. When I have a conversation with them, one thing I will bring up, whether they like it or not, is the presence of blacks in China and African connections.
Yes.
Now, a lot of them are very uncomfortable with it, but they're not uncomfortable talking about like China with visiting Africa a couple of 500 to 1,000 years ago. They're comfortable to say that. Okay, so you're there glorifying your greatness. We're just doing the same.
Yes.
That's all.
I taught a college class on the African presence in early Asia.
Yeah.
And I had 12 Asian students in my class, amongst everyone else, but I had 12. It was the largest number of Asians in any one class outside of engineering and math and science. And it was Introduction to Africa. And the subtitle was The African Presence in Early Asia. And what was interesting is that at the end of the class, after, we'd gone through the term, the Asian students as a group came towards me in the front of the class. And I said, okay, what's going to happen here now? Because I was using Dr. Van Sertima's work. I was using Runoko Rashidi. I was using James Brunson's book, Black Jade. Okay, I was using documentation showing the African presence before anyone else was there. Well, one of them, I guess, was chosen to be the speaker of the group. And he said, we wanted to thank you for this class. Because we talk about this class when we do our study group. And we talk about this class. And a lot of us talk within ourselves. He said, I'll tell you my example. When I go home to China, we have black people in my family, but they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
They don't talk about where they came from. And they say, I got family members got afros and very dark. And they're our cousins or aunts, grandfathers. We have pictures of people in our family that are dark, that are black, but we don't talk about it.
Don't seem to see them on TV.
No, they don't. No, not like that. And he told me, he said, you've answered so many questions that we have had. They had those 12 Chinese students had a study group specifically to study my class that I was teaching. They did their math, they did their science, because they study in groups. They did the math, they did that, but they had a specific class studying the African presence in early Asia. They say we have really got through that book. We've studied that book probably better than most of the black students in this class.
Because they're studying as a group.
That's right.
That's how you see. That is something that I'll give them credit for that.
Yes.
Rather than study as individuals, study it collectively.
Yes. Well, you know, brother, I've done research. There was a brother did research in California, UCLA, and he published his book. In fact, he published his thesis, and he wanted to understand why Asian students in particular, but white students too, did better than African American or African students, and Hispanic students did not do as well. And his dissertation studied this phenomenon. And what he came to realize is that Asian students and European students study in groups. And sometimes even African and European student, Asian and European students study in same groups.
Yeah.
And he found that African students and Hispanic students studied alone. He found that African and Hispanic students studied longer than European and Asian students. But here's the key. Here's what his thing was, and I've been developing study groups. Even in my own classrooms, I've been doing this. In a study group, if you put together 5 people in a study group, somebody got the answer for everything you might question. Some are strong in language arts. Some may be strong in math. Some may be strong in science. Some may be strong in physical ed or art. Some may have multiple intelligences. But the idea is that when you study in groups, we have to start our students in our schools studying in groups. I've always believed you shouldn't be larger than 5. So if you have a group of 10 students, you break them up into 2 groups of 5. No more than 5. Because then you got too many voices at the table. Like you can't have 20 students studying together. If you had 20 students, you have 4 groups of 5 or 5 groups of 4. Not under 4, not more than 5. Study groups. And remember, the reason why Asians are so successful is look at their ancient axiology. It is the person to the group. So they do very well in group settings. It's not that they're more intelligent. It's that they study in groups. They work in groups. I don't mean this because in Kemet, they had a neter that was an ant. And what ants do, first of all, ants can carry 35 times their weight. You know, when they have that thing on their back and they're carrying something, that could be 35 times heavier than they are. But that's how strong they are and agile they are. But also, ants act in groups. That's why we call them ant colonies. So that, like, if you want to pour water on a group of ants, you'll notice that they all move out the way at the same time because they send messages to each other. Okay? So that I don't want to say this in any way that seems negative, but the way the Asian community works is like ants.
Yeah, yeah. Well, funny enough, you said that. When I was in Hong Kong, and it was funny because I got a lot of stares, but it was like a lot of people, when they're walking towards you, the direction you're coming in, it was like everyone was thinking the same thing. Everyone's eyes is on you, and they're all walking in like ants. So I had to figure it out after a while. So it ended up being where I've got no choice but to focus and really look deep back. I want to say you can't look at everyone back, but I have a bit of a hard face on me. Like I'm getting fed up with this now. So I'm gonna eye you look back. So when I be eyeing them up deep, that's when you look away.
Mm.
So it was like I started figuring them out, their own psychology, because I had to. That's the only reason why I had to figure them out.
Yeah.
Because I've got like that many people walking towards me, and it's like almost a telepathic thing. Sort of like you're making up the answer, the messages to each other. It was almost like that. I was the standout person, the only brother around. And in Vietnam, if you go into, I went to visit the Hmong people in Vietnam.
Mm.
Now this is northern Vietnam in the mountainous areas. They're not, they're not really like dark skinned. They're more like the Mongoloids, if you call them that. And not every one of them was like looking at me really funny. They were okay with the Europeans coming in, but when they see me, so what it ended up making me do is really give them that look back. The look you're giving me, I have to give you back. You know, the smiles are coming off my face now because I'm just treating the same back. And also, I'm thinking in my head, I wondered if they're thinking that one time when there was the Black Presence there, and when they're seeing us, are they thinking, oh, God damn, are they back?
Yeah.
That's another way I was looking at it.
Yeah. And you know, another thing that could have been happening, brother, is the fact that you were tapping into their DNA, because in their DNA, they got the black people.
Yeah.
Remember, all human beings are black.
Yeah. There's no traces of them there.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for people like ourselves, and they're observing me, who's looking for someone like themselves.
Yes.
So I'm trying to take pictures of the darkest ones. It's like the darkest ones were treated more, the more noticeable. They're the ones I wanted the pictures of the most, so I can show people.
Yeah.
When I'm coming home.
Yeah.
But very funny behavior, yeah.
Yeah. You know, what was interesting is I visited Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
In Michigan. Michigan is a state. Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember that one of the only vegetarian restaurants was a Vietnamese restaurant.
Okay.
And I remember I had my braid out, my hair, my braid went down my back. And I remember that I was sitting waiting for my food. And I looked off to the side, and there was a man looking at me, and I was looking at him. And at the same time, we smiled because he and I looked exactly alike.
Yeah.
He had a long hair, he had a long braid like mine. His hair was straighter than mine,
Yeah.
but it was the same style. Comb back, coming down with little, things that wrapped it. He was my same complexion. In fact, he was probably even a little more melanated than me. And when we looked at each other, we smiled immediately. And we talk about antennas and ants, we probably thought the same thing. That was it. That was it. Same thing when we went to Hawaii. And we stopped in Maui before we could fly to the next island where we were staying. And I remember that I was walking through, and see, in Hawaii, the airport is open. You see, in the United States and in Europe, everything is locked down.
Yeah.
But in Hawaii, it's all open. You could walk off the street into the airports. And I remember I was walking, looking around because it's been a long time since I've ever been in an airport that was so open. And as I was looking around, I looked at as I was walking through, I saw someone, everybody was sitting on the benches, seats, and I caught the eye of a brother that was Hawaiian, but he looked like us.
I met some dark-skinned Hawaiians.
Oh yeah, well, those are the original Hawaiians, yeah. the Lapita people.
And it was a funny one, right? I was in like a bar now, and he was quite drunk. Doesn't notice me yet, so I'm observing his behavior, and to me, I'm thinking he looks a bit could be a bit of a crazy drunk. But the minute I've walked up, I'm coming to get a drink by the bar, and as he's locked eyes with me, it's like he snapped up out of being drunk.
Mm,
I was like really greeting me,
mm.
oh, where you from? And then we had these deep conversations. But it was like before that, he just seemed like a guy who's really drunk and acting a bit out of character, like smacking his hand on the table. But then once I spoke to him, that stopped.
Yeah.
It was like an instant thing. And then I was speaking about the African connection to
Mm,
Hawaii. And I told him why I'm in Hawaii, search for the darks in Hawaiians. And one thing he said to me as well, that what they call Africa is the land of the gods and the land of the spirits.
mm,
Wow, I was like, that this is what I was looking for,
mm.
and it kind of brought us more together.
Wow, that's something else, man.
Yeah, it was deep.
Yeah. You made him sober.
Yeah.
He became spiritual. You sobered him up. Yeah. That is spirit. That's what spirit does. It'll knock the drunk out you. Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful, man. It's powerful. There are so many things that we have, brother, as time goes on and as we begin to develop ourselves and see what's going on. And, I just congratulate you, brother, on the work that you're doing to bring this knowledge to our people worldwide, man. And we have to keep these types of things going on. And so I really appreciate the work that you're doing and the things that we're putting together and we're attempting to do for our people. And I really do respect your scholarship and your travel. You're well traveled and you come with facts and documentation, such as the story that you just told and the other story that you told when you visited different places. And I think that this is what our brother Runoko Rashidi, and this is what I used to always tell Runoko. And I used to tell him, you are our eyes in the world.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We see the world through your eyes. And the work, the traveling for our people, what I've noticed is I once took parents to another state when I was working. I had a parent involvement program for the children. And I brought the parents from South Central Bronx, New York, to Baltimore, Maryland, which is another state. And I remember I was sitting down and a parent came up to me and she told me, she said, I just want to thank you for this opportunity because this is the first time I've been out of the Bronx. Now, the Bronx is a borough. It's a small place in New York City. There are 5 boroughs in New York City. The Bronx is one, Manhattan is one, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. They're all very small places. But many of our people never leave their neighborhood in their life. And for someone like yourself, myself, we travel. I not only travel, after we talk, I'm heading down to Harlem. Okay. I'm leaving one borough to go to another borough. There are some people that don't leave their borough in their life. So they don't see the world. They don't see that man in the bar that looks like them in Hawaii. Okay? They don't go to Vietnam. They don't go to Kemet or Egypt. They don't go to Gambia. And so when you can bring this information to them, as Runoko Rashidi did, you are their eyes. And you allow them to see something that they could never even have imagined.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just very important, brother. So I congratulate you on the work that you're doing, and I thank you for this opportunity to be able to speak to my family. From your vantage point as to your audience and where they may be in UK, the world, America, because I'm sure you probably have folk that tune in from America. You have people from all around the world tuning into your program. You see, you bring something, which is interesting because you see, when most black folk think of Liverpool, they think of the Beatles. Okay, so you know what I'm saying. You know, when I tell people Harlem, you know, they have an image of what Harlem is, you know, so that you bring a new perspective to Liverpool because it allows black folk to understand that there are brothers in Liverpool doing this work.
It is, like I said, I don't actually know anyone actually like me in the city who's really out there exploring and going into these rainforests and the global African presence. I don't really actually meet anyone like that in my city. Liverpool, a lot of the talk of the slave trade,
Mm,
a lot of talk on just local community issues, jobs, them things. But like, it was kind of like something fresh when I started promoting things. Like 5 years today, I always remember this date, January 15th, when I brought Dr. Ranoka Rashidi to Liverpool. This day, he did a lecture in the Caribbean Centre of Liverpool.
mm,
From that day, my promotion has took off.
mm,
But what I've done is I put a free event on for the community. So I paid Ranoka Rashidi because at first I was trying to get donations off people where we all throw in the pot. But nobody was ready for it.
mm.
It is Liverpool. So I thought, I'm going to pay for this myself. I'm not interested in donations. I'm going to tell the community it's a free event and I'll see how it turns out. I've never put on an event before in my life for nothing. And no one, majority of people didn't actually know Ranoka Rashidi. There's only about 2, 3 people that knew. So I put on an event, got a turnout of only 45 to 50 people. But the spirit was amazing,
Mm.
which is number one. It wasn't about loads of numbers. I tried to get them back, but unfortunately, COVID happened 2 months later, March 2020. So I couldn't bring them back March 2020. So later on, I was able to interview Ranoka over the internet on Zoom, end of 2020, a year before he passed away.
Mm.
So from that day to day, when I put on that event, people started understanding. They didn't know about my history of all the traveling and that, but they got to know from that day. And then I started promoting things, put my own channel, creating podcast, so it was actually interesting 5 years to
Mm.
today.
Wow.
As far as promoting it publicly,
Wow. Wow. Well, that
I
makes
was,
me,
I was very underground before
yes.
that, very underground,
Okay. Well, that even makes today even more important
very,
that
very.
that we would celebrate this. I'm glad that we were able to make this the particular date, not tomorrow, not yesterday, but
Yes,
today, because we also celebrate the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King, as I said.
yeah.
And so, with your celebration of 5 years of having done this work and the privileges that I have to be able to be on your program and all of these combined, I know that we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, my brother. And
Appreciate you coming back onto my show.
oh, yes, man.
I understand you're the busy man. I see it. I watch a lot of your shows, like I see you on the Instagram, I follow you. I see you on YouTube videos. I've watched videos with you collaborate with other scholars, Clyde Winters, Dr. David Imhotep.
Yes.
I've seen so many different people, and your ones are always interesting.
Mm.
So I was really happy when I first reached out to yourself. I didn't know you were going to respond back to me
Mhm.
for us to even have our first interview.
Yes.
But when you responded back, it just all meant to be from there.
Yes. Absolutely.
Really
Absolutely.
appreciate your time, and your knowledge. I know you as Booker T
Yes, man.
or Professor Kaba even. So if I
Yes.
call you Booker T too much, it's just the old habit.
Yes. Yes. And I don't have a problem.
Yeah,
Like I don't have a problem. I grew up. I know a lot of people may be sensitive about when they correct their names, but I've
yeah,
I've 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 never had a problem. That's who I was, and I did great things as Booker T. So I'm very proud of
yeah.
of that concept. So I don't have a problem with that. And a lot of people do know me that way. So, I tell them, don't worry about it, Kaba will grow on you, but until then, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm
So
getting used to carbon now anyway.
yes, man. Yes, it's all good. And
It
so,
reaches
oh man, oh
one,
man.
two. It was
Okay.
just unbelievable. It
Ye-
was, I give you so much credit for that.
Wow, I
Graphic,
appreciate.
very graphic.
Yes, yes, I really appreciate that. And this is what I've been doing all my life, man. I got kindergarten children that were my kindergarten children. Now they're grown up. They got children. Some of them are grandparents. And they tell me the difference I made in their life as a child, as a 4 and 5 year old child, 6 and 7, teaching them Kiswahili, teaching them about culture, teaching them about being proud. I've had students that come from Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, and come to the South Central Bronx to live. And I remember I met in a supermarket not too long ago. I met one of my students and her mother. They happen to be from Nigeria, Yoruba. And she told me that she remembered me when I taught her in second grade. And her mother said, she used to talk about you all the time at home, about how you taught them about Africa, to be proud of who they were, and how you shared information about Nigeria, and you had them share their experiences. And so this is what I come to the community with. I know this works, brother. There's no doubt in my mind. Just as you sobered up that Hawaiian brother,
Yeah.
this information will sober you up.
Yeah.
Even if you ain't drunk, it'll sober you up.
Yeah.
It'll make you straighten up and fly right. So
If I could just, before we go on that, Brother Malcolm X,
mm,
because you're from New York and that, I'm interested to know your kind. You was with the Nation of Islam,
mhm.
and then you left the Nation of Islam. So, which is, what you get these people who say the nation killed Malcolm X, or it was government or whatever. What's the talk like? Is it in New York? Is it like? I understand later you got something called the Nation of Gods, the Nation of Gods later, rather than. The Nation of Islam still going. Would you say Malcolm X was going to more Pan African, or some say he was going towards Orthodox Islam? I hear different things which direction he was going.
I get the impression, well, first of all, his assassination was a combined attempt between infiltrators in the Nation of Islam
Yeah,
and government agencies.
I thought that myself.
Well, right now his family's suing New York Police Department and the FBI. They're already suing. So we already know that that's what killed Malcolm. But Malcolm was becoming a phenomenal force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
And that is why he created two organizations. He created the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, and he created the Organization of Afro-American Unity, because he knew that Malcolm outgrew the nation's philosophy. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad wanted the Nation of Islam to be strictly religious. As Malcolm went through the religion of the Nation of Islam, he began to realize, but to liberate and emancipate Black people in America, you had to also be political. And that friction started happening between only wanting to be religious, and Malcolm was trying to push the nation into the political aspect. Because he realized religion ain't going to free you. It's going to lock you in a box.
Yeah.
But you'll not be, because they did not vote. Nation of Islam did not vote. In fact, the Nation of Islam did not vote until Jesse Jackson ran for president in 1984. And so the political end of it was what Malcolm was saying, we have to. And what was happening is that Malcolm was growing, many of the Muslims that became Muslim because of Malcolm in the Nation of Islam, began to become members of the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. And many of the brothers and sisters on the street that did not want to become a Muslim joined the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. I'm sorry, joined the Organization of Afro-American Unity. So Malcolm was getting those followers from Islam, but he was also getting the grassroots people that did not have religion. Some could have been Christian. Some could have been Rosicrucian. Some could have been Buddhist. Some might not have had any religious affiliation. But his numbers were growing, and that became the threat to everybody involved, including Black organizations. That's it. Because a lot of people were leaving different organizations to join the Organization of Afro-American Unity. There were many religious groups that were leaving their religions to become a part of the Muslim Mosque Incorporated and then transfer over to be in both organizations, not just the Muslim Mosque, but also the Organization of Afro-American Unity. Malcolm was a genius, but he was born with a 39-year destiny. Had he lived, he would have done things in life that he couldn't have done in death. But because he died, he did things in death that he couldn't have done if he had lived. So that his legacy is one that is so powerful. The other thing is that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King was coming together. That was the other thing. Because because both Malcolm and Martin Luther King realized the same one that's going to kill me, it's going to kill you. And it came to be. It was only a matter of what, maybe 4 years apart. So, that was the other thing that was happening here. And because I taught a course on Malcolm for 11 years in college. And I thought I knew something about Malcolm. Being with Dr. Clark was one of Malcolm's teachers. Dr. Yosef Ben Yikanin was another one of Malcolm's teachers. So I got a lot of information about Malcolm through John Henrik Clarke. So I thought that I knew Malcolm. I also knew a lot of the people that knew Malcolm. And I've come to know many of them through the years that were very close to him. Many of them have passed away, but many of them, I had a chance while I was younger to talk to them about Malcolm. And but after I started teaching the class and I started getting into other areas, I began to realize exactly who Malcolm X was and why he was placed amongst us when he was placed amongst us.
Because some people read his autobiography and believe that they know he is through that.
Yeah. There's a lot more to just the well, the autobiography was shaped. Okay, to present him a certain way.
Yeah.
Okay. But to really understand Malcolm, you would have to go deeper in many different areas before you could ever really, and that's how I constructed my class on Malcolm X. In fact, I have a webinar on, I have a 4-part webinar on Malcolm X. Where I'm trying to go into different areas of Malcolm and what he represented, because he was a multifaceted genius. And the other thing is that, you get the impression that Malcolm became intelligent when he went into prison, but that's not true. Malcolm X was always intelligent. He always read books. He didn't just start reading in prison.
Yeah, because that's the narrative that we get.
Yes.
Like, he was just a criminal, and he was not.
Yes.
He was intelligent. Yeah, I'm happy you said that.
Oh, yes, Matt. And his mother, Louise Langdon from Grenada, she was brilliant. She spoke multiple languages. She was a prolific reader and writer. The reason why Malcolm was so intelligent was because his mother was intelligent.
Elijah Muhammad gets too much credit.
Yes.
Too much.
Yes. And I'll tell you, somebody else who was very instrumental in Malcolm's development was Clara Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's wife. She was like Malcolm's mother. This is a, and I always tell folk that are in the nation, I said, you all need to do a PhD program. Sisters need to come together and do a PhD program in the University of Chicago on the life and times of Clara Muhammad to understand exactly. She was the first one that went to meetings and met the Honorable Noble Drew Ali. She was the one that got Elijah Poole, her husband, to go to those meetings of the Moorish Science Temple. He was the one that gave Elijah his last name, Muhammad.
And then also Farad Muhammad before Elijah, he's supposed to be credited as the founder of the Nation of Islam. Farad Muhammad.
Farad Muhammad was a member of the Moorish Science Temple.
Okay. Yeah.
He was a Pakistani rug dealer. And he went to prison too for a lot of different things, but that's beside the point. But Fard Muhammad, Wallace Fard Muhammad, was a member of the Moorish Science Temple. And when the Noble Drew Ali was murdered, he broke off and created the Nation of Islam.
Okay.
And he wanted to take over the Moorish Science Temple. And the members of the Moorish Science Temple that had been with Noble Drew Ali from the beginning said, oh, no, you ain't going to do that here. And they said, you better get out of town. And so what he did is he moved to California. But before he moved to California, he told Elijah Muhammad that you'll be the leader of the lost and found nation of Islam. That's how the story comes.
Interesting.
Okay, when you get down into the story, there's a lot of Nation of Islam members that don't want to hear me say that. Brother,
I mean, to me, Farad Muhammad, like, I don't know a whole lot, but he seemed like a bit of a calm man.
He was. That's exactly what he was. That's exactly. But you see, he was a Pakistani. He belonged to the Ahmadiyya sect of Muslims.
Okay.
And that's one of the cornerstones to the Nation of Islam. And to the Moorish Science Temple. The Ahmadiyya sect of Islam, and the book that deals with Jesus Christ. There's a book that deals with Jesus Christ, the Gospel of Jesus Christ, something like that. That book, and the Ahmadiyya and the Quran was combined by Noble Drew Ali, and that's what became the Circle 7 Bible of the Moorish Science Temple.
Yeah. Because some of the teachings, what I used to hear from Elijah Muhammad, and the message, for example, listen to the audio book. It's like a lot of what you just said, then combined, and was it the Gospels of Jesus Christ?
Yes. Yeah. The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ.
The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And the Quran combined together.
Yes.
And whatever else they put in there.
Yes. Yes.
That became of.
Exactly. And you see, Fard Muhammad taught Noble Drew Ali the performance or the ritual of Islam. You see, the salat, the praying 5 times a day, or 7, or however many times the prayer, the 5 pillars of Islam, that is what Fard Muhammad brought to the Moorish Science Temple. He sort of shaped the ritual, the ceremony of the Moorish Science Temple. And in that is what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad got.
Yeah.
But you see, when Malcolm started traveling, he began to realize how localized the Elijah Muhammad was brilliant. He created a religion that was specific, just like Noble Drew Ali, specific to the conditions of the black man in America.
Yeah.
And that is what made it so popular. Malcolm was attracted to that in his early days as Detroit Red when he was imprisoned and other things like that. But as he grew, and then when he traveled internationally, he began to realize that, no, that's That's not all there is to this. He outgrew the locality of the Nation of Islam. Nation of Islam took people off drugs, took people off alcohol, straightened them up, did phenomenal things, really great things. But at the same time, they were in a bubble. And it was because they were in the bubble that they could stop drinking, they could stop drugs, they could get married and have children and live a decent life. They could, but they were in a bubble. Malcolm was saying, yeah, that's a bubble, but the thing is, we're in America. We got to do other things.
Like this to like man was like the story of the Yakub story.
Yes.
The scientist that supposedly created the white race 6,000 years ago, experimented. Like stuff like that sounds like crazy, but like just like where did he get these stories from?
I always told people it's a metaphor for the Ice Age.
Okay, interesting. Great point.
That's what I always say. Yakub was a metaphor.
People take this very literally.
Very literally, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's not to say that there were not scientists that did experiments with human biology, but they didn't create a white race. You know, to me, that's my interpretations of the science of it. But in religions, you can get to believe Yaqub like you believe Jesus, like you believe Muhammad, like you believe all these leaders, like you can believe Zoroaster, you can believe Buddha. There's a lot of things that you can start to believe if you concretize it into a religion. But if you're looking at it from a scientific perspective, a cosmic perspective, you're looking at the whole picture. When you look at the whole picture, there are other questions that come into view. That's why my hand was always up when I was in Catholic school, because there were some answers. I had some questions that what you're saying, sister or father, whatever, is not answering something deep inside me, and I need to know some things. And don't tell me that it's a mystery, that God has mysteries and you can't question mysteries. Don't tell me that, because I'll question mysteries. I don't care. And I'll ask God. And I eventually did. And I found out that I actually was God having a human experience. And so was that nun if she had opened herself up to the reality. And so are you, brother. And so are all the listeners to this program. Each of us is God having a human experience. So I invite the community, brother, to go to my website, www.kabakamene.com, KABAKAMENE.com. And you can download my free e-course and study guide at that site. You put your email into the slot, and when you do that, the first day of the e-course, 6-day e-course, the first day will come down and my study guide will come down to you. My study guide is probably the most important document I've written. Dr. Clark said that he used to tell me, you may not get to your destination, but if you write the proper roadmap, those that come behind you will pick it up and continue your journey. And that study guide is my journey.
Excellent.
It has all the books, it has all the themes, Africans in Asia, Africans in America, Africans in Europe, origin of life in Africa, all the books that I've done over my life, putting that in place. So I encourage the younger generation to pick up the study guide, and no matter what. Today is mine. Tomorrow's promised to no one.
Yeah. This is exactly what Professor Kaba said. Make sure you pick up this study guide. It's got a lot of information, and he just give you the information on it. So check it out. It's a brilliant brother. He's been going for a very long time. He's worked with the greats, the Dr. Ben, John Edgar Clarks, and many more. The few names to mention. Well, I want to thank you very much, my brother, Professor Kaba. This is James Diboe Discovery, dedicated to original peoples. And like I said, I look forward to when we meet up again. And it's always a classic podcast.
Yes, man.
Learning, thinking, it's a connect, and the connections there.
Yes.
And the listeners, hopefully you're learning that you could be next. Peace, my brother.
Keep on keeping on. It ain't over till we win. Solar power is the future wealth of the planet. Teach the children.
The spiritual connection.